Welcome in. I think you can see us. I'm going to go with yes. I am Clay Travis. You probably, hopefully, have some clue who I am. Just finished the Clay and Buck show. We had a tremendous time talking about shark attacks in New York City, the first one since the 1950s. Those of you who are long-term people who enjoy my content know I've always been a big proponent of the Animal Thunderdome, the idea that we're always under attack. In the other side of the screen, you can see right now, far better looking and far younger, and also headed for a long career in this business is Katie McDuffie. Some of you may recognize Katie because she's been on the road with me for the last year when we were on the road for college football. She's done a lot of fabulous man-on-the-street interviews. She has been a tremendous help to me. I am here in our New York City studios. Katie is in a different room. We do a lot of OutKick shows, as you guys know, all different sorts. I just want to say off the top, thank you. I didn't know how the book would do. I have not written a book since 2017. I think Republicans Buy Sneakers came out. Maybe it came out in 2018, I guess. But I wrote it in 2017. It's been 5 years. Right now, as I speak to you, we have the number 1, number 4, and number 8 book in the bestsellers of political and commentary. The book is number 1. The audiobook is number 4. I recorded all 10 hours. If you're not a reader, you can listen to me read every word of this book, American Playbook. And we are number 8 on the Kindle list. We are somewhere, I believe, number 1 for hardback nonfiction in all of Amazon. We're competing with all these different like fantasy books that I don't even know what they are, that all these nerds buy millions of copies of. So that's impressive. And what we're doing here is you can go buy autographed copies. I have signed 6,000 right now, autographed copies of this book. They are for sale. I'm going to continue to sign them. Katie is in charge. She has got a list of questions that you guys have submitted. Some of them were incredibly offensive, I'm told. Most of them were not. I told Katie beforehand when I said, hey, I'm going to solicit questions. Some of them are going to be rough. She knew what she was getting into. Katie, how would you assess the questions? What percentage positive, negative, and offensive?
Honestly, you got a lot of love, no kidding, because the book is absolutely fabulous, almost as fabulous as your hair. No, it really was incredible. I'm lucky enough to have read it early, and it's an easy read. It's fun, and as a Division I athlete, I can say that this is the pregame speech that every Republican needs to hear right now.
So that's great. I want you to give your background for people who may not be familiar with you. You live in New York City now. You work with OutKick. Like I said, you've been on the road for college football, but you also just mentioned you were a D1 athlete. What's your background for people out there who aren't familiar with you?
Yeah, so I played lacrosse at Stony Brook University. Not to brag or anything, but we were ranked number 1, guys, Division I. So
legitimately the best women's lacrosse team in the country.
Right here, just a humble brag, guys. But I also, right after college, I graduated in 2020. So unfortunately, I didn't get to finish my season.
Hold on for a sec. They stopped your season? Like they just suddenly, you couldn't play lacrosse anymore. What was that like?
I mean, it was horrendous. We were actually in a meeting with everyone in my athletics, and we were just meeting about, we're going to push back the season 2 weeks. We got to do what we got to do. But we're not going to cancel the season. And during that time, the NCAA tweeted out that our season was just canceled without even a heads up. And then the room just went silent. So that was heartbreaking for me. I actually had the opportunity to go back and finish my season, but I went to DC and
you graduated and went to work in media. You were ready to roll.
Oh, and I was also covering riots too. I walked into Georgetown where I was living at the time, and everything was boarded up, and it was March of 2020. So you could imagine how crazy that was. But getting back to the book, it's enough about me. It really was incredible. I feel like people are going to be laughing along the way. Everyone's going to be highlighting all the same quotes. It was absolutely amazing. And the point that you really hammered home is the fact that Republicans don't need to just win by a small margin. We need to win in a landslide election. You want Rachel Maddow to be crying before midnight. You want to go to bed early.
It's true.
So just break down why it's so important, why we need to have this massive win.
So one part of the book, and I'm glad you asked about that, Katie, is when I use an analogy from my background. When I first started doing radio, and some of you will be familiar with this, it was at 104.5 The Zone back in the day, Nashville, Tennessee, sports talk radio station. When we first started, we were changing things. I was on a 12 to 3 midday show. It was called 3HL, which initially stood for 3-hour lunch. Again, some of you are probably old school, have been listening to me for a long time. And what I was told all the time was, be careful what you say on the air, because if you upset people, you will lose audience. And if you rock the boat a little bit too much. And what I experienced there was the station was already successful. And I think a lot of times, and this goes for all facets of life, you can put on golden handcuffs. And what I mean by that is you've got some level of success, but you spend so much time worrying that you're going to lose what you already have that you aren't willing to take the risks and advance your career and take the chances necessary to get far bigger than you ever would have been otherwise. And so what I see in politics, maybe I'm rare. Evidently, this is rare. I totally am comfortable with losing. What troubles me is not losing. It's being so afraid to take a chance that you end up not growing and not being willing to take that next step. And so we had an incident at the radio show where I was a little bit controversial. For the backstory, this is in the book, but it was about a Brett Favre press conference. He was in the middle of a sexual harassment allegation for sending penis pics, of all things, to a New York Jets employee. And I talked about that on the air, and people were really kind of worked up. And my boss came and he said, this is going to tank your ratings. People are going to be so offended, they're not going to listen anymore. And I said, and I would say this for politics too, if you are so afraid to take a risk that you end up creating boring content, then you've already lost. The golden handcuffs are on. I said, we talk a lot in this station about losing listeners. How come we never talk about adding listeners? And I take that lesson and I apply it to politics because there's so much fear in political campaigns. Katie, it seems to me that every political campaign is being run so that ultimately it comes down to what 8 people in Scranton, Pennsylvania decide. And I think what you have to do is go back to the drawing board and say, hey, I'm not worried about losing people. Let's focus on gaining. And instead of worrying about whether a field goal is going to be made or not, remember, only one election in the 21st century, 2008, have both sides agreed what the outcome was. I said, why can't we go and reformat and recalibrate and adjust and build a brand new coalition that's designed not to narrowly win by a few thousand votes in Michigan or Wisconsin or Arizona or Georgia or any of the toss-up states, one that's designed to legitimately deliver a landslide. And so I sat with that premise in mind and tried to write a book about what a platform would look like that could deliver a lasting and consistent and incredibly powerful win in the overall landscape of politics. And so that's the essence of this book. That's why it's called American Playbook. The idea is, in the same way that you would design a playbook to try to win a sporting event, let's design a playbook that leads to a landslide victory.
And you definitely have to take risks. I mean, imagine you weren't bold enough to take a risk and make OutKick. And you even look at Jason Aldean right now, who took a risk and isn't afraid to stand up to cancel culture. And that's a theme throughout this book, is we need to be the party that stands up to cancel culture, that goes up against this woke virus. So just tell me about that.
Yeah, look, a big part of my argument, we were just talking about it on Clay and Buck, is I think Republicans need to be the party that embraces creativity and that embraces comedians and that embraces jokes. Have you seen the television show, The Righteous Gemstones? You ever watched it?
No, I will not know any movie reference. Most of them in the book, I actually didn't know at all, which is really sad. And you can judge me for that.
There's a great, really funny show. It's in year 3. It's called The Righteous Gemstones. And we just had a caller call in who works on that show. They film it in Charleston, South Carolina. It's hysterical. It's really, really funny. And I think when you look at what the coalition that can be built is, it's a coalition of people that believe jokes should be able to be told. whether it's Dave Chappelle, whether it's Danny McBride on Eastbound and Down, or the Righteous Gemstones, whether it's Bill Maher on the Bill Maher Show, whether it is Chris Rock in his special talking about Will Smith slapping him. Chris Rock talks about selective outrage. I want to embrace creativity. White, Black, Asian, Hispanic. I want to expand the universe of Republican voters, because I think the Republican Party needs to be redefined. And I think it needs to be redefined as a party that embraces freedom, that embraces free speech, that is anti-cancel culture and pro-creativity. And so this book, and I'm signing some of these copies as we go, you can buy them. We got a bunch of signed copies. I appreciate all of you out there that have already gone and made this book #1 overall right now in political commentary, #4 overall with the audiobook, all 10 hours. Yes, I recorded every word, and with the Kindle book. But also I understand people want to get autographed copies. By the way, I'll be in Cleveland tomorrow. I'll be in Atlanta on Thursday. And Katie, you tell me, you're a lot younger than me. One of the big challenges is appealing to people who are younger, because that is the area that Republicans get crushed the most. I imagine you read a lot of this and you thought, yeah, and I would hope that you thought, hey, maybe this is something that some of my friends who are younger would respond to in a way that they might not respond to the traditional Republican Party.
Yeah, I mean, I want everyone my age to read this book, especially since we've all been indoctrinated. I mean, I went to Stony Brook University, which is probably the wokest school in the world. I'm not even joking. When I showed up on campus the first day, the first thing they taught me, not where the library was or, basic things like that. They're like, you actually are not allowed to assume people's pronouns. So you have to ask people their pronouns before you ask them their first name. Absolutely wild. But I actually want to go to the chat here. We have Heather from Massachusetts. She said, what's your initial reaction to being banned on CNN and ESPN? I mean, that's got to be a badge of honor, right?
I think I'm the only person in America who is banned on both CNN and ESPN. Remember, for people out there who don't know, and this was written about at the start of my last book, Republicans Buy Sneakers Too, I got banned from CNN for saying that, and joking, right, that I believed in two things completely: the First Amendment and boobs. And I write about this a little bit in this book. But the reason I said that is because when you say you're a First Amendment absolutist, which I am, people kind of get confused because absolutist is a confusing word. They don't understand it. And so I said, the only two things that have never let me down are the First Amendment and boobs. And CNN lost its mind. They won't allow me back on the network. So that's how I got banned by CNN. I got banned by ESPN for simply pointing out that they had gone fully woke and that their business model was collapsing. And I am, I believe, the only person in America who is banned to appear on both CNN and ESPN. Ultimately, I took it as a badge of honor, Katie, to be honest. I appreciate Heather asking, because what it means is I'm going to say whatever I think without fear or favor of how others are going to respond. And I think what people want desperately is authenticity. I think people are open to disagreeing. We are all going to not agree on everything. But I think what they feel like is that many people in media and certainly political universes are lying to them every day. So I actually took it as a badge of honor. I'm going to tell you exactly what I think. And if you won't let me on your program, that's life.
I think the first time I ever saw you was that viral clip on CNN. And I was like, you know what? I think I'm going to work for that guy one day. He's awesome.
Well, what's funny, Katie, is I've got a 15-year-old, I've got a 12-year-old, and I've got an 8-year-old. About 2 years ago, every kid suddenly in my oldest kid's school experienced that clip on TikTok because it went super viral and millions of people liked it. And I actually took that as a sign that maybe this youngest generation isn't lost yet, because overwhelmingly everybody loved it. And what they loved was I didn't apologize. I think there's a desperate craving for say what you believe. We just saw it with, what's the guy's name? Neo, the R&B singer who won't apologize for saying there's two genders. Yeah. Hey, by the way, how crazy is it that you would have to ever apologize for that? And so I took it as a really good sign that it went viral on TikTok and almost everybody loved it. But my oldest kid and all of his friends suddenly saw it, and I was a celebrity to them. They loved it.
And you know what's so interesting? You've always said exactly what you thought. And actually going back to when you were 18 years old, the first thing you've ever published was actually standing up against cancel culture. Tell us about that. It's an incredible story featured in the book.
So I give credit. I wish I knew who had found this, but I went to George Washington University undergrad. And when I was a freshman in college, there was a campus controversy because a George Washington University administrator had used the phrase rule of thumb. And a rule of thumb, is a common phrase. And a left-winger on campus created this huge controversy and said this guy should never use the phrase rule of thumb because based on its etymology, the idea is a man can beat his wife so long as the ruler's no wider than the width of a thumb. That was the what she said was the etymology. And so I wrote, I remember reading that at 18 years old and thinking, what in the world is going on? This is what year were you born, Katie?
1998.
All right. This is the year before you were born. This is 1997. I wrote this letter to the editor, and it was a full-throated defense of the First Amendment. This is the first thing that I have ever written that's ever been published anywhere. I had almost forgotten about it. And one of my readers, tracked it down. It's available online at the GW Hatchet. This is a school student newspaper. And he sent it to me, and he was like, hey, I was doing a search for your name on the George Washington Student newspaper. And I, by the way, wrote a couple of sports articles, not surprisingly, because I did a little bit of work with the newspaper. But he found this letter to the editor that was published, I think, in November of 1997 when I was a freshman in college, first semester. And I read it, and I just thought, man, this is amazing. I believed exactly the same thing about the First Amendment in 1997. Now, what's ironic about that, Katie, is in 1997, I was a Democrat. I worked to get Bill Clinton elected, and defending the First Amendment was actually a left-wing perspective at that time. So that's when I say I have stayed consistent. The number one criticism you could come up with for me is, Clay Travis, he has the same opinions he did when he was 18, and now he's 44. But I loved when I read that because other than using way more big words than I would use today, it's basically the exact same position that I would espouse today. Now I'm considered a right winger. Back then it was a left winger. My position and principle has remained the same.
I mean, when I read that, I thought, there's no way this was happening back then, but it was, and it was crazy to see that. And the only way I could justify that is the fact that you went to school in DC, and people in DC are absolutely crazy. Like, it's just not shocking at all.
You missed, Katie, because you're young. You were born in 98. People who are watching this or listening to this or seeing this clip, they may well remember back in the politically correct universe in the 90s, the country lost its mind. And that is a small version of the woke insanity that we see today.
It's gotten so insane and so out of hand. And I actually want to go to Kendra because she asked a really great question. You majored and taught creative writing. What's your favorite things to write about? And do you have any advice for someone who is wanting to sharpen their journalism and writing skills? And you talk about your creative writing career in your book and how you could potentially be a professor in creative writing in another world.
It's a great question, Kendra. And thank you for bringing it to light here, Katie. A lot of people don't know this. So I went to law school. Most people know that because given how much often legal issues arise, I talk about the fact that I'm a lawyer. I went to Vanderbilt where I met my wife. We've been married about almost 19 years. Happy early anniversary. And let me say this too, by the way, if you're watching this and you're catching parts of it, conversation is going to be online at claytravisbook.com. So if you want to hear it again, share it with friends, claytravisbook.com, and you can get your signed copy of the book. Tomorrow, by the way, I'll be at Books A Million in Fairview Park, Ohio. That's Cleveland area at 5:30 p.m. Again, in the Cleveland area at Fairview Park, Ohio. So there is a different world where I was a creative writing professor because I also went back and got another graduate degree at Vanderbilt. I got an MFA, a Master of Fine Arts in Creative Writing. And I taught creative writing at Vanderbilt. And I love all the jobs that I have right now. But if you told me, hey, what job do you not have now that you also think would be really cool to do? It would probably be to teach creative writing or storytelling. Could be either in the legal field or in the writing field. And what I would say is important. I think this goes whether you any part of media. Katie, and I told you this when you started working. I said, I now do writing, radio, and TV. And I moved from writing to radio to TV. Why is that? I think it's because each job gets progressively easier. If you can write, you can organize your thoughts to be able to make an argument, which is basically what you do on radio. And if you can do all that and you can present yourself at least somewhat decent cosmetically, then you can do television. I think there's a reason most people don't go television, radio to writing, the opposite direction that I went. I think it's because each job gets progressively harder. And there's lots of people who can do television that can't write. I think certainly there are people who can write that can't do television, but it's primarily cosmetics, not because they can't make arguments. And so to me, writing is the foundation. And what I always say, and I would say this to my kids all the time, and I wrote about this a lot in the book, don't overthink it. The best advice I can give for writers is write every day. And it's very common to say, oh, I've got writer's block, or it's easy to come up with a reason why you're going to watch something on television. And I had a professor, and he said to me, I think about writing like I think about going to the gym. Every day I don't want to go to the gym. Every day I don't want to go for that jog. I don't want to lay down on the weight bench. But when I'm done with it, I feel really good about myself that I did it. And I'm not always going to have a perfect workout. I'm not always going to feel amazing. What I say is, if you are a writer, 1 hour every day, do it. Just do it. And if you have to start with a clock, find a way to do an hour a day. 1 hour a day. And if you can do an hour a day and you can string them all together, eventually you will end up with your own book. And I don't believe in writer's block because I think that writing is a labor. It's something that you do for a living. Nobody ever says I've got plumber's block. Nobody ever says I've got electrician's block. Don't pretend that writing is something other than a labor. And if you are a laborer, you work. And I think of myself as a laborer. I'm going to sit down and I'm going to write every day. I have to show up every day for 3 hours of live radio. I'm going to show up later tonight on Jesse Waters and do television. But I think the best advice I ever got is do it for an hour a day. Never take a day off. Understand that every day is not going to be perfect. But if you string together an hour of work writing every day, at least, you're eventually going to get pretty good. And so that would be my best advice. And then don't try to publish everything. Don't worry about people reading what you write initially. Work on your craft. The other thing is, Katie, especially in the internet, somebody wants to write one good thing and then they want to rest on their laurels. You can't just rely on one good thing. Excellence comes in producing consistently. Lots of people out there can hit a golf shot as good as a professional can. Mm-hmm. If I play 18 holes, I can hit one shot that's as good as a professional. The reason why you're a professional is you can do it over and over again. So you have to do it over and over again. Consistency makes excellence. That's my advice. An hour a day, do it.
And my favorite thing about your writing style is I feel like anyone can pick up this book and they'll be able to understand really insanely complex topics. And you really do a fabulous job of dropping statistics on how to prove your argument as a Republican. I love the one where you said that Mexican cartels are making more money than the NFL in 2021. They made $13 billion. Yeah. So just tell me about how you really analyze all this data and share it in this book.
We're all entitled to our own opinions. And if you read this whole book, I don't think you will share every single opinion that I do. And that's fine. That's okay. You shouldn't have the exact same opinions as me. You should write your own book and have your own opinions. I think we're all entitled to our own opinions. We're not all entitled to our own facts. And I would be really disappointed if somebody ever reached out and said, hey, you got a fact wrong in this book. Because to me, facts are the building blocks of good arguments. All of my facts are correct. My opinions you can agree or disagree with. And people who are longtime viewers or listeners will remember this analogy. And I've had to update it because Tom Brady retired. But if I said to you, we're going to kick off NFL preseason's underway, Katie. The Kansas City Chiefs are the defending Super Bowl champs, right? If I said to you, I don't think the Chiefs are going to win the Super Bowl this coming year, a lot of you out there might say, okay, I can see that. Maybe it's going to be the Bills. Maybe the 49ers are going to get their act together. Who knows what team might rise up and beat the Chiefs. But if I said to you, I don't think the Chiefs are going to win the Super Bowl, because Patrick Mahomes has never been to a Super Bowl before, and I don't think he can get there. You could agree with my conclusion on the Chiefs, but you should trust me less because you know that I'm wrong, because Patrick Mahomes has been to, 4 Super Bowls? I think I'm right about that. He's won 2. So saying they can't do it because Mahomes can't do it would be something that's factually incorrect. And so what I see happen too often is people will agree with a conclusion, but they don't care about the method by which the conclusion is reached. To me, what I try to do is build a logical argument based on facts. And you mentioned the way that I write. Mm-hmm. I made a calculated decision some time ago to write and talk and sound like myself, whether you're watching me on television, on Fox Sports or Fox News, or you're watching or listening to me on the radio show. I want my writing to sound like a conversation so that you hear my voice and it sounds consistent across radio, television, and writing. And so that has to be accessible. And the other lesson I would take, and I took from that, is I basically think of myself as someone who's speaking to a jury. And the best trial lawyers can distill really complicated stories down to their essence and make a janitor understand the same way that a neurosurgeon would understand. And so I'm always thinking to myself, I want everybody to be able to read this book, understand it, whether they have a high level of education or whether they're like my grandfather and they got an 8th grade education. And so that's my goal in mind every time I sit down to write.
You know, the analogies in this book are absolutely incredible. I really, really enjoyed them. So it's just absolutely fabulous. I want to go to another question here from Jeremy. He asks you, what inspired you to write this book now? And it's interesting because you're not taking any profit from this book.
Yeah.
You're donating.
Yeah, I'm going to donate the proceeds to whichever Republican candidate ends up the nominee in 2024. I feel incredibly fortunate because in 2021, I sold my company. OutKick to Fox. And that basically guaranteed that I never have to worry about money for the rest of my life. And then I can take care of my kids, take care of my family, wife, everybody. And so when you have that happen, you sit back, and I've always said, like a lot of people out there probably think, what would happen if I won the lottery? Mm-hmm. I've always said the best position to be in life is if you won the lottery and you found out that afternoon that you won X amount of dollars, and then the next day you woke up and you wanted to keep doing what you were already doing, that's a sign that, to me, you've been living life the right way, because your labor is something that has value to you. I feel like I have the best jobs in America. I get to say exactly what I think every day, radio, television, writing. And so what I want to do going forward is try to make the country as good as it was to me in the 1980s, the 1990s, and the early 2000s. I want to create that same environment for my kids. And I've got a 15-year-old, a 12-year-old, an 8-year-old. So I wrote this book because I want to get us back to a place in America where 60% of the Americans think the president's doing a good job. And so how do we get there? The answer is this book. I think if you read this book, I think 60% at least of Americans would say, hey, you know what? I think Clay Travis is right. This is the right playbook. And I got frustrated because nobody else was making the arguments that I was. That's one reason I founded OutKick. But also no one else is writing or saying a lot of the things that I am. And certainly COVID was a spur on this. And so I was super excited to be able to bring this book to the masses. And I hope people really, really enjoy it. But that was the inspiration. It wasn't money. I'm in a good spot where I don't have to work to make money now. I can work because I think what I'm doing is important and influential.
You know, that really was the appeal to Trump back in 2016. I mean, he had all the money in the world, and that's why people actually trusted them. And then you compare that to Joe Biden, who we're now seeing completely took advantage of his job in power. But, you know, you're right. I think anyone who reads this will agree that Republicans can win the 2024 election by a landslide. Yeah. And I want to just throw a curveball in here, Clay. Are you ready?
Fire away.
You wrote this fabulous book on how to win the election. Will you ever run for president one day?
President? I have no idea. That's a big step. But they're trying to get me to run for governor.
Okay.
They're trying to get me to run for governor in Tennessee. And you know, for people out there who don't know, I live in Nashville. I'm born and raised Tennessee. I I don't know. My wife's not excited about the idea. And the other thing I think about here, and I mean, this is serious, in the same way that you asked about like why write the book. I think about how I can be the most influential. Am I the most influential version of myself on radio, on TV, and writing and running OutKick, or would it be running for political office? And I don't know. I mean, again, our platform is so big, as you know, millions of people consume the radio, the TV, and the written content every day now that we produce. And so a big part of me wonders what's the most efficient version of myself that I can be. So I don't know the answer. I know I'm locked in for the next few years running OutKick. But, you know, when we get to 2026 or so, we'll see what happens.
I mean, just keep me in mind for press secretary. That's all I'm saying. You know, but DeSantis actually fired his campaign manager.
I saw that.
So, you know, what's your thoughts? I mean, honestly, I really do believe that if Ron DeSantis picks this up, if Donald Trump picks this up, they should read it. I mean, this is how to win the election. Just break that down for me.
Yeah, well, I know both those guys, you know, decently well at this point, and we've had every Republican candidate, I think, on Clay and Buck. So I feel fortunate to have met them or had them on the show. My analysis would be that Ron DeSantis is betting everything now on Iowa. He has to win the Iowa caucus on January 15th, or he has to lose basically in an even race with Trump in order to really feel like he has the momentum to end up the nominee. So he is a burn the boat strategy now, where he's all in on Iowa, and we will see how all of that ends up shaking out. But there's no other pathway, I don't think. He has to win Iowa or New Hampshire or lose them both by such a tiny scintilla in order to set the table for Nevada, for South Carolina, and for March 5th and then Super Tuesday and beyond.
All right, I'm going to ask another question from Charles from Virginia. How'd you go from being a sports guy to politics? This is something you discuss in the book. I mean, how'd you get here today?
If COVID hadn't happened, there is a world, I said earlier, there's a world, a version of America, a multiverse, since my kids love the Marvel movies, where I'm living in some college campus and I teach creative writing for a living. And I think there's a multiverse, certainly, where I'm still doing sports talk radio every day. COVID was the impetus where I left full-time sports and went into the larger political arena. And Buck and I have talked about this quite a bit on our show, but fighting for sports to be played, and this is written a lot about in the book during COVID, was so much more important than who might win the Super Bowl. I'm a Titans fan. I'm a University of Tennessee fan. I would love for the University of Tennessee to win another national championship. I would love for the Titans to win a Super Bowl. But ultimately, life doesn't really change unless you're a member of those teams, coaching staff, based on who wins championships. Who wins elections and sets policy matters. And so I cared so desperately about schools reopening, about businesses being able to open, and importantly, about sports being able to be played, that I went all in on that when there were no sports going on. And something interesting happened. Our audience skyrocketed in March, April, May, June of 2020. Not one sport basically was being paid. I was on for 3 hours every day, and our audience skyrocketed. And I had the same boss in sports as I have now on politics. And Julie Talbot came to me and she said, Clay, the Rush Show is bigger than anything anybody could ever have in the world of sports. You could work in sports talk radio building this audience forever, and you would still have a pinprick of the influence that the Rush Limbaugh show has. And so she sold me on it. It wasn't something that I sought out. It was something that she saw based on the data, based on listening to the show. I love her as a boss. She is fabulous. And she pitched me on it, and she introduced me to Buck. And she said, I think you guys can do the smartest, most original, entertaining show in all of media. And I like to think that 2+ years in, we're fulfilling her hopes for us. And that was the impetus. And even my old radio show bosses on sports, they called me and they said, you can't say no to this. They said most people would crawl on their hands and feet to get this opportunity in radio. You're not even seeking it. It's being offered to you. And I've loved it. And I like to think that, again, with this book, we'll actually send sanity back to the White House And I feel privileged to be able to sit down every day and say exactly what I think.
And that's the thing. You really are doing this for your kids so that they have a better future. And, you see all these crazy headlines, especially, Riley Gaines was just attacked yesterday in Texas. And just like coming from the perspective of a female athlete, we really have to go all in on tackling transgenders, staying out of female sports.
Yeah.
And Republicans need to embrace that. So just talk to me about that and what's really at stake. Because if we lose in 2024, it's hard to even picture. If I have a young girl one day, what sports will look like, because it's just a point of no return.
Yeah, look, to me, this is a point of clarity that crystallizes how broken the left-wing perspective is. I don't think most people out there would ever have anticipated the idea that men who decide that they are women would be identifying as women and being named Women's Athletes of the Year. I don't think if I had made that argument 5 or 10 years ago, I think people would have said I was crazy. But I think it's the perfect representation and epitomization of how broken left-wing arguments are, because it requires you to admit and enforce and lie to yourself when you say that men who identify as women are no different than women. Even the identity of saying, hey, biological man or biological woman, that we don't need the signifier of biological. They're saying now, Katie, when babies are born, sometimes doctors get the sex of the baby wrong. And I just hear things like that, and it's so fundamentally broken and so absurd that it's hard for me to contemplate that we ever got here. And so I don't feel like I'm saying anything radical. I just feel like I'm saying something straightforward and transparent and clear, which is men should compete against men and women should compete against women. And that isn't in any way designed to say you can't decide to identify as a different gender. Fine. If you're over 18 and you make that decision, it makes you happier in life, good for you. But I don't think you should be able to identify as a different gender and then argue that you're a women's sports champion, as ESPN will do. And I just keep hammering this, Katie. We are speaking to the 80% or 75% of sports fans every single day. There's a knife fight for the 20% of woke sports fans, to the extent there's even that many. And I think what wins over time is authenticity and honesty. And I think OutKick, and I like to think myself, and certainly a lot of our employees, you and many others, are as honest and authentic as we can be when it comes to sharing what our true beliefs are.
It's really just getting back to sanity at this point. And, you look at the athletes that are being put on a pedestal, whether it's LeBron James or Megan Rapinoe, they absolutely hate this country. And Clay, the way you ended this book was beautiful. It had me in tears. Tell me about that. I don't know if we could give away the ending, but
I won't give away the ending, but the way to think about it is this. I really am an optimist. Mm-hmm. And I believe that America is the greatest country that's ever existed in the history of the world. And I believe that because of the life that I've been fortunate to lead. And my name is Clay Travis. I am named after my two grandfathers. Richard Fox, who I've written about before, who played football in the 1930s at the University of Tennessee before he had to drop out and go to work during the Depression and take care of his family. He played for General Neyland. He played against Bear Bryant. That's one side of the family. That's my mom's side. The other side of the family, I'm named after a man named Clay Travis. That's who I was named after. He is from Muhlenberg County, Kentucky. And he and his dad, so my great-grandfather died of black lung disease after working in the coal mines in Kentucky. My grandfather had to drop out of school in 8th grade, and he went to work in the coal mines and ultimately decided that he couldn't and wouldn't want to spend the rest of his life in the coal mines. So he left Kentucky and came down to the Nashville area to a place called Old Hickory, Tennessee, where he worked in the DuPont factory for his entire life. And again, he dropped out of school in the 8th grade. I feel incredibly fortunate to be able to do the things that I do. Neither of my grandfathers graduated from college. One of my grandfathers didn't even graduate from high school. I am named after them. And within the space of 2 generations, I got to go get 2 advanced graduate degrees at Vanderbilt. I got to take incredible financial success and steps based on the American dream that my grandfathers provided for me, that my mom and dad provided for me. My parents went to MTSU. It's Middle Tennessee State University for people who are not familiar with the area. Neither one of them ever made $50,000 a year in their lives. They both worked full time. And I am able to have the success that I am having today because of American exceptionalism and because this is the greatest, freest, and most profoundly opportunistic laden country, in my opinion, in the history of the world. And so I refuse to believe that our best days have already passed. I think they are still ahead. I think that if you make persuasive and honest and true arguments, that the American public will respond. I like to believe that I have done this in the book. If you are wanting an autographed copy, you can go get one. But I would also just ask, if you like the book, go out there and share it with a grandkid. Go out there and share it with your son or daughter and say, hey, just read this. Think about the arguments this guy's making. I think most people will agree. And so I care about how many people have the book because I want this thing out there circulating, because I do think we're in a war for the hearts and minds of the American population. And I think the arguments I make in this book are important to making America the best version of itself.
I remember when you first kind of gave me a sneak peek of this book. We were out to beers with my dad. And I remember you telling me, we're going to have this golden era where Republicans are going to take over the White House for years to come, not just 2024, 2028, generations to come. And I remember sitting there thinking, I don't believe you. I went through Stony Brook University School where everything was completely indoctrinated. Everything was woke. And, you know, I was brainwashed. I was like, there's just no way we're going to come out of this. But after reading this book, I absolutely believe it. I am 100% convinced.
Here is a way to think about it that I will contextualize it for everybody. So if you think about Jimmy Carter's election, that happened before I was born, but I was alive for the very end of Jimmy Carter's presidency. I was born in 79. Jimmy Carter was an accidental president. After Jimmy Carter was beaten by Ronald Reagan in 1980, and this is basically my whole life, from 1980, I would argue all the way through the 2012 election. That is 32 years. All the way through 2012, every election was about which party's candidate loved America more. And sometimes those were incredibly successful campaigns. Reagan in 80, Clinton in 92, Obama in 2008. I would say they were all connected, and the theme that connected them was America's awesome. And so in the wake of the 1960s excesses and of what I would argue was the lost vision for America, we had 30 some odd years of really stable governance. Even when Bill Clinton was in office, he ran the office very much in a moderate way. And what did most people think? In the 1980s, most people thought Ronald Reagan was a pretty good president. In the 1990s, most people thought Bill Clinton was a pretty good president. I think in the wake of the Biden presidency, we are going to embark on a multi-generational return to normalcy. I think there's a desperate craving for it. And I really do believe that that is what the future of the country is going to entail.
It's amazing. I mean, Clay, the book is absolutely fabulous. I'm not surprised by its success. And, you know, as a 24-year-old who, you know, Joe Biden and all these politicians aren't going to be around for my future, it really has brought back hope. And I hope more people, I'm going to give it to all my friends so that they all read this. But we want to end with 22 questions in 2 minutes.
22?
Yeah, do you think you could do it?
I don't know. I mean, I'll try. I got to be fast, I guess. Okay,
all right.
Fire away.
All right, let's do it. 1, where were you born?
Nashville, Tennessee.
All right, who would you want to play you in a movie?
Oh, God. Well, I'd want somebody good looking, but what's the guy who would you suggest?
Channing Tatum, but I'll pick Margot Robbie. I mean, she's like a billionaire. I didn't like Barbie, but we'll move on to the next one.
I would go with who's the guy who's in the movie about the soccer team, Apple, the comedian. I'll look him up right now. Keep firing. I'll give you that answer because I think he kind of I mean, you know what I'll go with? I'll go with the Jim Halpert guy from The Office, whatever his name was.
All right. I like that. Next one. What was your first job?
I worked at Media Play. For people out there who don't remember, they sold CDs, they sold books, they sold like every type of media available. It's kind of a big box retailer. I was in the book department.
All right. I love it. What chore do you hate doing the most?
I don't do a lot of chores. Truth be
Where's
told.
Laura?
The Travis boys help with a lot. Laura is a super strong shepherd of the house, but I am in charge of taking out the garbage. So I would suggest probably taking out the garbage.
All right. What is your biggest fear?
My biggest fear. Oh, that's such a good question. I think I've got a height thing. I don't like if they have those clear. You can walk like in the Sears Tower out and stand on the clear and you can look all the way down. I think I've got heights, but I would say number one is snakes. I'm a very anti-snake person. I hate snakes.
All right. Well, we're giving up on the 2 minutes, but I have to expose you for sleeping in your parents' bed till you were 12 years old because you were such a scaredy cat.
By the way, yeah, that's true. I kept getting in my parents' bed. Allie says Jason Sudeikis. That was the guy, either Jim Halpert, who was played Jim Halpert on The Office, or Jason Sudeikis. I think they could play me.
All right. I like it. Next one. Who makes you laugh the most?
Well, the show that I like the most right now that I think is absolutely hysterical is Righteous Gemstones. But the person who consistently makes me laugh the most is Larry David.
All right. What is the one thing you need to have in your fridge at all times?
Salsa.
Salsa. I love salsa, but I also love queso. What is your favorite school subject?
History.
History. Oh, that makes sense. Who is the most interesting person you met recently? You can name drop. Please name drop.
I mean, I've met a lot. I'm fortunate to have gotten to meet a lot of people. I mean, I think you have to say Trump, right? I mean, he's a supremely interesting guy. I would say probably Trump.
I thought like it might be like a country star or something. I feel you just like run into them at breakfast.
Star. I'm trying to think of the last time like I was starstruck meeting somebody. I meet a lot of athletes because of what I did at Fox Sports. I got to meet Pete Rose was pretty cool, just like as somebody that I grew up watching. So for athletics, that was pretty impressive. Frank Thomas, I grew up with his baseball cards. I would go with some of those guys. Matt Leinert's a friend now. I never would have thought that I'd be friends with Matt Leinart. So they're a bunch.
He's awesome. I mean, my one claim to fame is that I met Taylor Swift, but
that's pretty badass.
I mean, I hugged her, but I didn't really like talk to her.
Is that a meeting? Like, would she recall that you guys met?
No, I had the video proof though. I got picked out of the audience because like I was dressed up all crazy and I was picked out of the audience, like one of like 10 people in the stadium, and I got to hug Taylor Swift. It was the best day of my life.
Up on the stage?
Yes.
How have I not seen this video? That's a pretty big deal.
The braces were a lot, so hopefully you don't see it. But next question, what is your middle name?
Richard Clay Travis is my full name. My mom thought Richard Clay Travis, because I'm named after my two grandfathers, sounded better than Clay Richard Travis. But in the South, it's not that uncommon to go by your middle name. So I've been Clay my entire life.
Yeah, I actually knew your name's Clay. Rich. That's so funny. Next one, what is your biggest pet peeve?
My biggest pet peeve, I don't know. I don't get too worked up about things. When I'm old, this may be the old man answer. When I can't find a sporting event on television because it's on streaming and I have to call my kids in, or maybe I should say when my kids lose the remote control, which they inevitably all do, and I can't manage to actually put on the game. I also hate when technology doesn't work because I'm not smart enough to figure it out. My only move is turn it off and turn it back on. So that would be several. I
mean, if my mom's watching this at home, she knows I'm the one that always loses the remote. So I'm sorry,
kids
Mom,
are
if you're watching
for that, ruining everybody's experience.
What is your guilty pleasure? And let's just go through 3 more of these and then we'll be good to go.
I'll answer them all, but my guilty pleasure is, I could eat, I mentioned salsa earlier. I could eat chips and salsa all day long, every day.
I love it. Mine's reality TV. Next, do you have any hidden talents?
Hidden. I mean, I'm pretty cocky, so I think if I have any talents that I would broadcast them well. I think, unfortunately, I don't think I have that many talents. I think I happen to have the talents in the way that I make a living. But I would say maybe people don't know how much of a Civil War history nerd I am. I think I could really kind of blow people's mind the degree of knowledge I have about the Civil War.
I think your hidden talent is your dance moves, because I saw you up on stage at that charity event. I don't know which one it was.
With Lit, the band My Own Worst Enemy, which is the opening song for Clay and Buck now. I really thought I was pretty fantastic there.
I agree. All right. This one's kind of strange. I don't know if you'll know the answer to it, but what is the color of your toothbrush?
It's green. I think green or blue. It's either green or blue, because it's always green or blue, but I'm constantly like getting a new one or whatever when I go to the dentist. So I always go with green or blue.
Green or blue.
But I'm not sure which one it is right now.
What is your pet's name? Don't you have more than one?
Well, I was not pleased about this, but my wife during COVID convinced the boys that we needed to get cats. And then the boys had to make a persuasive speech about getting cats. So we have 2 Bengal cats that are, they were like $1,000 each. It's ridiculous. And their names are Egon, like Egon Spangler, and Leo, which I believe is the name of the cat in Caillou. And my 8-year-old now, he was younger then, like first grader then, was involved in naming them.
Adorable. I love it. I have a dog at home named Bear. He's the best thing in the world. Next one, what is your favorite word? I'm actually really interested to hear this one.
My favorite word, the one that I probably use the most, is crazy, because I feel like the country has lost its mind, and I feel like the word crazy doesn't have an easy synonym. So I would probably say crazy is my first, because I feel like I'm talking about crazy things all the time.
All right. What is the last album you bought?
I have not ever bought an iTunes.
An iTunes?
Yeah, whatever it's called. Or like I've never purchased digital music in my life. The only thing on my phone is that free U2 album that they gave away on the iPhone. I've never purchased any digital music. So the last concert that I went to, that's a good question. I think it was Foo Fighters.
Wait a second. So you just don't listen to music on your phone, or do you just look it up on YouTube? I
don't listen to music. Like if I'm in that, first of all, I don't listen to that much because I'm in radio. But if I'm in my car and I'm driving, I'll put on like 90s on 9 or like the early 2000s music if I want to listen to music on satellite radio. Or, and this is more frequent, I listen to sports talk radio.
That's so interesting. That's crazy.
Yeah.
What is the last gift you gave?
We gave, my wife graduated from law school and took the bar. And my kids and I gave my wife a new necklace that my 8-year-old picked out as a congratulations, you took the bar exam gift, which was like 2 weeks ago.
Oh, that's so adorable.
Yeah.
Congrats, Laura. What cause is dear to your heart? I think I know the answer to this one.
I mean, I think the First Amendment. I think it's the foundational belief. I think it's the foundational right that defines and protects everything in this country. So the First Amendment is near and dear to my heart. That's the cause that I care about the most. Your ability, my ability, everybody's ability out there to say exactly what we think about everything under the sun.
I love it. All right, next. What is your greatest achievement? This one's loaded.
I think it's the 3 kids. I mean, if you stripped away everything else, my boys are the thing that I'm most proud of. I hope that they're going to have fantastic lives. They're what I spend most time thinking about professionally. So that's my life, my kids. Professionally, what am I most proud of? I think it's just to be able to make a career and have founded OutKick to allow hopefully a lot of other people as well to make a career being honest every day.
It's amazing. The last question is, where do you want to go that you've never been?
Australia and New Zealand.
Australia?
I would love to go to Australia. I'd love to go to New Zealand. I'm a big traveler. We just went to Italy. I'd never been to Italy over spring break. We took the kids. I love taking my kids and traveling with them. I would just absolutely love to go to Australia and New Zealand.
I love it. I was just in Italy, but I didn't do it with kids. So I'm sure my trip was a little bit more.
My boys are getting old enough where you can kind of go anywhere around the world. So I would like to think that I could take them to Australia and New Zealand, and we'd have an incredible time together.
Honestly, your kids are the most well-behaved boys I've ever met in my life. I might not know them in their crazy times, but
credit to my wife.
All right. But let me just say the book is absolutely incredible. You can go buy it right now at claytravisbook.com. I went in thinking, Republicans don't really have a chance at restoring normalcy. And now I am convinced that we are going to win by a landslide in 2024 and for years to come. So very exciting. Congrats.
Go buy your books. Thank you, Katie. You're killing it. Go follow Katie on Twitter. I shared her link, and I appreciate all of you. Look forward to seeing some of you tomorrow at Books A Million in Fairview Park, Ohio. And then I will be in Atlanta next week. Just quickly, I will be in Salt Lake City, in Houston, in Tampa, Florida, in Nashville. Week after, I'll be in Milwaukee. Can't wait to see many of you out there.
I love it. Thanks, Clay. Congratulations.
Thank you, Katie. Good job.